Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next Contabo broadcast. Today, we are going to talk with Jan Jaap, Chief Revenue Officer from Acronis, and we'll ask him a couple questions around the disaster recovery plan and how to get prepared, especially if you are a small business. Hey, JJ.
Hello, everyone.
It's great to have you here, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce disaster recovery plans to Contabo community.
You're welcome. No problem.
So, could you tell me a little bit about yourself before we start? Like, who are you? What is the company you're with, and like, why are you guys the right people to talk about when we're talking disaster recovery?
Sure, no problem. So, as you already mentioned, my name is Jan Jaap, or everybody calls me JJ. Very easy. I have been with Acronis for a very long time, active and also just in the back end. In the last couple of years, I've been working mostly into the cloud space. So when I joined Acronis full time, we started working on our cloud solutions. And that is basically where Acronis is today, that the majority of our business is into the cloud space. Many of you probably would know us from the past, and that is that we started originally in 2003 as a Singaporean company where we got founded as a consumer-based company. We had our Acronis True image, which is a household name for many of you. That was our key product for many years. And then over time, due to the request of partners, we went into small, medium business, into enterprise type of business. And since the last 8 years, we have our Acronis Cyber Cloud solutions, which is completely based on a cloud-based infrastructure, multi-tiered, multi-tenant solution. What else can we share about Acronis? So we are headquartered in Switzerland. That's our financial headquarters, although still our roots in Singapore, where we got founded. We are a global company, but we proud ourselves that we are very local. We do transactions in 150 countries. We are in more than 33 languages around the world. We have 40 locations and offices. And especially where we are in the cloud space, where we very much focus on is providing a local service, means that we operate more than 30 data centers ourselves. And through our partners ecosystem, we have more than 300 data centers that we provide local services. And that is very important when we talk about disaster recovery.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. So let's get straight to it. What is a disaster recovery, JJ?
So disaster recovery is if something doesn't go like planned, you have an insurance. I always compare it to an insurance to recover that what you do on a daily basis. So if you get sick, you don't want to do that. But if you get sick, you want to make sure that you can go to a hospital, you can go to a doctor, and you don't get overloaded with bills or rejections because you're not insured. It's the same in the IT space. You do, in many cases, your protection front end means that you're trying to prevent that something happens, but it's no guarantee. Mm-hmm. And it means that if something happens with your infrastructure or your information or your data, you need to be prepared that you have a disaster recovery plan. So a disaster recovery plan is not saying I have a backup and that's my disaster recovery plan. That's great. It's a big step forward, but it also contains of multiple other steps as well that you need to take into account to make sure that the disaster recovery will also happen in the time frames that you need it to be.
So obviously, we have all heard about the fire in the OVH data center a couple of weeks back, which was the moment for many people to realize, oh, I need a disaster recovery plan. But I guess this is not the only situation in which disaster recovery plans comes in handy. What are the other situations that you have seen in the years of your experience where disaster recovery plan was helpful for the company or proved to be?
Yeah, the OVH case is, of course, a unique situation. How many times did you hear that a complete data center burns down? So I would say this is kind of like not winning the lottery, but it's the chance that something like that happens is very, very, very small. So still, it is a very good example of why you need to be protected, because if people have thought that in any kind of data center, because you're not managing it, but it is done professionally, you avoid being exposed to any risks. No, in the contrary. The biggest cases right now today is not because of technical failure. Most of the disaster recoveries that we see in our company is just because of humans, is misconfiguration or mismanagement, or the wrong use of, especially now with COVID, a lot of people are not in corporate networks that are protected by the right, security levels. No, they're at home, they're on the roads, and they basically have a different way of protecting their home secure infrastructure. And it means that there's much more exposure from that perspective. So if you look at where the majority of the disaster recovery scenarios come from, it's not because of technical failures or data center burnouts. But it does show you that you need to think about it. And we always say is that don't think that just by having one backup is enough to be protected. For example, you could have had a backup onto your second server in the OVH data center, would not have helped you, right?
Yeah.
So we always call about 3-2-1, means that you always need to have 3 different backups in two different medias in at least one different location, so that if something happens, you're indeed also in a different location protected. Now, for example, last year we saw a massive spike in increase, especially in the United States area, and it has nothing to do with technology or with human mistakes, but it has to do with natural disasters. There were a lot of wildfires, there were thunder or storms and cyclones, and we have seen then that people that are in those areas are starting to think more about, okay, my business is in this area. If I'm exposed, yes, sure, I can have my hard disk and have a backup in my office, but if my office burns down or my office is impacted, I can still not work.
Yeah.
Disaster recovery is also not about how quickly can I recover the data that I have, but it's also what data can I recover? What is the RPO and RTO, and how quickly can I operate my business as usual, even though I'm not using my own infrastructure that I normally have.
Mm-hmm. That kind of makes sense. But many people say that, it's obvious that a big corporation needs a disaster recovery plan. But what about small businesses and sole entrepreneurs? Do they also need disaster recovery plan, or it's an overblown idea
I think
for companies of this size?
It's the opposite. If you even go a layer down, your personal life, how much do we today capture in videos and photos? Like how many times do you hear a story? And of course, we as Acronis hear it a lot, that people call us up and said, hey, my phone is broken. Can you help me restore it? Because, it's precious data is on it, because the video of my kids doing the first steps, I cannot recover it. It's an extreme example, but that's basically just emotional information. Just think about you as a single person. You operate your business, and you don't have a fallback of financial support, or you don't have a fallback of a huge team that basically can help you with whatever happens, or you have a big insurance that basically pays for the damages, but you're just a simple small medium business or home office type of person, and your important information about your financials, your customers, or maybe your online store, your e-commerce shop is basically your livelihood. If that's gone, this is irreparable kind of information, right? So I think it's crucial that everybody thinks about what your disaster recovery plan would be in the future.
It is true that a lot of small customers are underinsured, underfunded. So I agree that this could be an issue, but in the same time, they don't really have that much time and resources to think about this because they're busy doing business. Like I've been there, I've done that in the past. I remember how was it or how it was. But the question is, are there ways for small businesses to get this, comfort of having a disaster recovery plan without investing serious money and serious time into developing one?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and of course, that's absolutely available. There are plenty of partners that offer those types of services. Acronis is one of them. There are plenty of other vendors out there in the market as well that offer easy access to some form of remote or geolocation backup and disaster recovery types of services. The killer differentiation in what is out there is the simplicity. If you talk about enterprise type of technologies, you mostly have IT people that can deal with managing and setting up this type of service so that it is operated in the right way. In a more simplistic way, a small, medium business or a single person, it doesn't have that knowledge per se. Sure, you can spend time and invest in to learn it, but it beats the purpose. It needs to be simple and easy consumable. And that is, and that's what I already mentioned at the beginning, that's where Acronis is a little bit different to some of the other ones. Why? Because we came from the consumer side. We started in the consumer side. And the consumer side is very simple. If your solution is not easy to use, then it will not be used. And you're not selling, or you don't get the reputation into the market. And that's the concept that we have been always having. And that means also, if you work with Acronis or with a partner that uses Acronis, and there are plenty of partners that use that, setting up a backup is relatively straightforward. You select the files or the server location that you would like to back up, and you back it up. But then to make a disaster recovery that you can access at any time, and within 15 minutes, you can boot up automatically a virtual environment that basically represents exactly the same infrastructure that you had on your dedicated server or virtual server. You know, as you can already hear, it sounds a lot of words, could be very complex. And that's what we have tried to simplify in by saying, if you have a backup with Acronis, it's a 3-click step where you don't have to put any kind of settings in it, because we have already a backup of your server, and we can automate very simple the disaster recovery plan. And that is the information, or that is the kind of process that is super important if you would like to serve those smaller customers in those businesses in those areas.
Awesome. Before I'll ask you about the details, how Acronis can help, I would like to stop one step earlier and just discuss what are the operational areas that should be included in a disaster recovery plan. Like, you've obviously mentioned data, but what are the other things that you should think about in terms of, like, what do I need to think about? Like, what are the operational areas that I should think about while preparing my disaster recovery plan?
So first of all, you prioritize what is indeed highest priority. And then you start defining categories of that. How long can you be without? Because it could be that you have some kind of server with some information on it, and if you take a week to recover it, it's no problem, right? Because if you put certain data on a different location, you're always depending on the traffic and speed that you have. If you have done your categorization in the sense of which information is important, then you need to figure out, okay, what kind of devices are you going to back up? You know, you have maybe a virtual environment, you have a dedicated server, you maybe have a cloud environment, you maybe have Microsoft 365, or you have G Suite or Google Workspace that you would like to back up. Maybe you have a mobile phone that you would like to back up, or an iPad. So you categorize then which workloads you would like to protect as well in that particular categorization of importance. Then you decide about, okay, if something happens, how quickly do you would like to recover? So that has nothing to do with the data or which device, but how quickly does it need to be recovered? Is a day or two okay? Or do you want to have it instantly recovered? Or can it be a half an hour? Can it be a half a day? That's that. And then the other thing is, where would you like to bring the data? It means that what's your, I would say, geo-redundant backup strategy and disaster recovery strategy. We always recommend to have not in one place, but you will have it somewhere else. How do you do that? How frequently do you do that? So all of those steps you take into account. Now, if you've done that, then it gets actually towards the next step, in the sense of, okay, so now you've done your backup in prioritizations and locations that you have to find based on your categorizations. Then you need to say, okay, how do you test it? Because if you like it or not, there are still a big percentage of backups that people do, and they think that they are secured if something happens. And then when something happens, they try to recover from the backup. Oh, and the backup was corrupted, or the hard disk was not working anymore, or some version of file or some system didn't work in the way that it was, and that's why you cannot recover in the way that you thought it would be. So that means that you need to start doing a testing schedule. Very important. Then the next step would be, if there's indeed a disaster recovery, who's going to be in charge? What's your internal processes? Who's going to react, and who's going to send which kind of information to which kind of persons, to make sure that everybody that needs to be getting involved and knows their tasks? Or basically you build not only an IT plan of how technology works, but you work also on a workflow plan, how you deal in scenarios where you have a disaster.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. Like I know myself a lot of small businesses where basically there's no technical people in, right? And it's also the question like who do I call, right? And what are the steps there? Okay, so let's talk slightly in a slightly bigger detail about this. Like you've mentioned that Acronis as well as some other companies are able to help to basically simplify such a process. So um, once I've created such a checklist, I felt like, okay, what are the things that I need to basically have in my disaster recovery plan, no matter it's data or it's applications that I use or devices. And it's like I know what is that, I know how quickly I need to get it back. Um, then what is my next step? Like, where do I take it to actually make that happen without spending, days on building my disaster recovery plan?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So either you go to a service provider that has those types of services. We work with plenty of hosting providers in the world where those types of services are part of the infrastructure. But we also work with MSPs or so host together, where basically they take our solutions and they install it. And it's relatively straightforward. If you go towards, for example, an Acronis website for the cloud solution, there's an express sign up. You sign up, within minutes, you get a confirmation. I would say mostly within 1.5 to 2 hours, you get activated into our online console. And within the online console, you can start registering your server that you have in whatever data center you have, and you build a backup plan. And the backup plan is created mostly in a minute or two. You do a backup. The first initial seeding of your backup might take longer, so you wait for that. And as soon as you have done your backup, you basically go towards the section that says, I would like to have a disaster recovery from this particular server so that I can remotely in a different location boot up this server and work in the exact same way as what I have in Contabo data center, for example. And you do with a 3-click process, you can automate that. So we have automated the whole process. We know how to capture the virtual IP and then basically flip everything over so that we can run that into a virtual environment. And you don't have to install, you don't have to buy additional hardware or rent different hardware or storage. Everything is then operated automatically by Acronis. And that means that if you have done a disaster, you basically go into the console and you can click on boot up my virtual environment. And then basically you can start working from that environment exactly in the same way that you do somewhere else.
Do I understand right that it can be just set up basically in a few clicks on your website, link it to my existing server, for example, in Contabo data center, and then just in case I'm able to basically get the recovery point there?
And the great thing is, disaster recovery doesn't come only about making backup and recovery, right? If you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, you talk about identifying, protecting, detecting, then responding towards a disaster, and then, of course, doing the recover. So all of those elements are in the Acronis solution. And the only thing that you need to be doing is installing the agent. So you have also agentless. It's not even easier, but not for everything. But basically what you do, you basically install on your server an agent that basically consists of vulnerability assessment, antivirus, basically the prevention portion of it, anti-malware, anti-crypto mining, anti-ransomware. Then you have, of course, your backup solution in there, and it's also connected to disaster recovery. And coming back towards, because I really want to highlight that, very important to test your backup and disaster recovery is super important, because people think too often, I have my backup. And just take into account that hard disk lasts an average lifetime 2 to 3 years. So,
we know something about this in Contabo.
Exactly, right? You know it as well. We go through tens of thousands hard disks a year just because they break. And it means that if you think you have something on this hard disk, think again, because you need to test it. And that's what we try to make possible as well. That means within our solutions, you can actually test for 2.5 hours each month, free disaster recovery of your backup that you've done in the disaster recovery enablement that you've done with our solution. And you can do that every month at least once.
So do I get it right that you can kind of simulate
Yes,
that you had a disaster and see if you can
exactly.
actually recover that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that you
Okay.
can keep on testing. And that is not only good for yourself, but we also do it for our MSPs, our service providers, to make sure that they are guaranteed that what they're providing as a service to their customers is also what is actually working, right? Because you don't want to be surprised that if something happens and then, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot because.
Okay, so just for the benefit of people who are listening over to this conversation, once again, what is the name of this product in Acronis portfolio?
It's Acronis Cyber Cloud and Cyber Protect. So Acronis Cyber Protect. Cyber Protect is this all-inclusive one agent that includes security, antivirus, anti-malware, ransomware protection, plus backup, plus the disaster recovery.
Okay, then let's talk something that is always important for small businesses, and especially for Contabo customers who are known to be very smart in terms of the prices they pay and choices they make in terms of that. How much does it cost?
It depends, right? You can go towards our website and then you can download already a simple security product, cyber protection product, or True Homage product for $40, $50, which absolutely does a perfect job towards that what you like to provide as a service for your just single workstation or your server or virtual environment. But if you go in different kind of categories where you would like to have a more professional service, it depends on the service provider that offers it, or you go towards our website where you can find some of those services. Mostly what we would recommend, you go to any kind of service provider that has this types of service available, and then you have it here in multiple options, either by device, that means you pay per device what you have if you store locally yourself, because then there's no storage from this vendor, and then you pay a device-based pricing that could be a couple of euros or a couple of dollars depending where you are, or a couple of hundreds of yens if we talk about Japan. Or you have a gigabyte pay-as-you-go model where you pay per gigabyte. And the gigabyte-based prices depends on where you are. It's between 16 cents to sometimes even 6 cents per gigabyte, and then you pay as you go. And there's also unlimited models. For example, if you go to Microsoft 365, where you just pay per device and then you have unlimited gigabytes.
Okay, then I understand it's like the pricing is not there's not one single price that you can give me, but
because it's about the value, right? It's about the value that's added. If you are an MSP, you add certain value, you have certain support. If you go to Acronis, basically we will support you. We will make sure that everything is managed. If you have questions, we will support. And every managed service provider or vendor has different layers of SLAs or how they get supported or not. And with that, you have also different pricing concepts for that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people have some kind of feeling of what level of expense are we looking at. Because again, like Contabo community is very cost conscious. And we want to help them make the best decisions regarding the prices always, not only when it comes to our product.
There's one thing that maybe we can share. I think if you look at a normal infrastructure, what are you using? You're using security software. You're probably using some patch management software. You probably, or you should use some backup software, not even talking about disaster recovery. Then maybe you have some vulnerability assessment software or looking at your inventories that you have to make a list of all your things that you have. You probably have some kind of remote management software to get access towards your server. Right now, today, in this new world with COVID, everybody works from home. So to support your devices that are remote, you have some remote software. That could be simple as TeamViewer, or it could be some kind of other tools that we have, like LogMeIn or so on. All those 5 elements are very critical and key to protect and to make those particular environments accessible. But each individual one, you have, of course, individual vendors, and you pay an individual price for it. And that's why we're trying to simplify it. So if you really look at Acronis, we have this one agent where all of those elements are into one install. So it's not only about cost savings, but what is really the true cost? The true cost is making sure that you don't have this overhead of 5 different applications and you need to switch from one to another. But it's also about how the level of security works if you're integrated with each other. Because one security software doesn't communicate always with your patch management or with your backup software. That's what we changed. Because we have it in one agent, we can communicate between each other. It means that if you need to do a patch, instead of, oh, I need to apply this group of patches for my system, okay, let's make a backup first. Let's go to my backup software, down my backups, go back to my patch management, do the patch, oh, something goes wrong. Okay, go back to my backup, recover from my backup. You understand? Those are multiple steps, multiple interfaces. What we have done, we connected those. So if you decide to do a patch, you don't have to think about it. You need to do a backup first. No, we basically do that automatically on the backend for yourself. Then we see if the patch works well. If the patch works well, all fine. If it doesn't work well, we can actually also recover from that particular backup automatically without you having to do anything for it. So that's kind of like the integrations, add-on security layers and automation that helps, of course, a lot as well, because cost is important, but it's also how you can save time, which is also cost.
This was actually my next question, because obviously, like, it's good to know what is the cost, or like how much do I spend on a monthly basis to make sure that that my servers are protected just in case, and I have a disaster recovery plan. But in the same time, it's also the matter of time, right? So putting aside the initial setup time, how much time does it take to basically maintain this the setup that we have discussed?
It depends. If you have a very active environment that have a lot of exposures from outside or attacking points, or it's a very large infrastructure, then sure, you probably should monitor it, of course, more frequently. But the good thing is that within our case, we have very clear dashboards and automation reporting tools. That means that even an end client that has their antivirus plus backup on their desktop, what I have on my desktop for myself, every morning I step up and look at my dashboard and see, okay, how many malware has been prevented? Did my backup work? Do I have patches that need to be installed? Mostly I don't even have to do it because my administrator does it for me. But theoretically, if I want to, I can click on the patch and say, hey, apply it. So it's a relatively intuitive interface based on widgets. So you can also represent the information that you would like to see. And that's basically it. It basically warns you if something needs to happen. And then we show you what the step-by-step is, how to make that correction, or to delete a certain file, or to contain another malware that is on your system.
Awesome. Okay, then why don't we just try to apply this, the knowledge you have shared with us to some particular case? Like, why don't we just try to do a case study? And I brought one case that is very close to my heart. So my mom runs a boutique law firm back in Poland. And years ago, I was trying to help her create such a disaster recovery plan. And why don't we try to do it together, just to show people what kind of thinking and like what are the questions, what are the things that you need to take into consideration, and then how this goes into tooling, so that it's easier for Contabo community to figure this out. So where do I start?
So it comes back to what's an earlier question: what's a disaster recovery plan? What contains of it, right? So let's take it simple and say, okay, you have an email server, or you have an email
client. Let's say we have an Exchange server,
server,
Microsoft
or
Exchange
maybe
server.
Probably now today it's Microsoft 365.
Or to make it more interesting,
right?
Let's say we have Office 365. Yes,
we
have a billing software. We have a web page, right?
Right, and then you probably have your document share sync server, or you have some server where you store data, and then you have your workloads, or the mobile devices, your laptops, your PCs employees are working with it. Let's say you have
And we
5
have
employees.
a server where we have the billing software, right? Because
Yep.
everybody moved to working remotely, so we cannot have it in the server under our desk now. We need to take it outside. So we have a VDS in Contabo, and we have our time tracking and billing system there. So yes,
Yep.
to sum it up, yes, we have mobile phones, we have laptops, we
Good.
have Office 365 where we keep email and files, and we have billing software. And I think that's, at least for now, I think that's basically everything that comes into, and we have the website. Yeah, that's
All right,
next.
good. So what's then the next step? So of course you make a plan. What is the most important information? What's the RPO and RTO or the SLA times that you would like for the individual systems? Also very important, how do you want to deal with privacy, right? So for example,
Of course.
if you deal with lawyers' offices, which we do a lot, and for example, accountancy offices about very confidential information. So sure, you can pick any kind of location where you can store the data, but you need to make sure that your data center is HIPAA compliant, for example, or GDPR in Europe that is taken into account to make sure that you work also with a vendor that does it. So let's say you have now defined your whole plan, you went through all your categorizations, and then basically you start applying, okay, so how do I roll out my software? And in this case, with Acronis, you register an account with Acronis. You basically have your management console, and in your management console, you say, okay, how many devices do I have? You basically install the agent for your mobile phone, for your iPad, for your laptop, for your servers, where that you have in your infrastructure. They show up relatively easy into the interface. And then basically what you do, instead of going to the individual devices and making a backup plan, what you do, you create a standardized backup plan or security plan that basically cyber protects your environment. And you create that, which basically includes security, includes backup, can include also disaster recovery. If you've created that, then you say, okay, which devices would you like to add to this plan? Now, here you come back towards what's your prioritization of importance of information. Let's say you have a high priority plan for your financial data, the data that you're sharing from clients, and for example, email, because that needs to be very quickly recoverable or you need to do something with it. So that's your highest priority. And then you have a second priority that is maybe just an archiving folder, an archiving
we can live without a website for a week, right?
Or for yes,
depending
well,
on businesses, but I'm just
right?
saying in the role of our legal office, I would say, customer documents and emails, you need to have them as quickly as possible, right? The
you
website,
don't want to be in a court case.
you can exactly. You can survive without website in
so you
case
have those
of disaster.
You have those tiers, and then so you make 3 plans: a high priority plan, middle priority plan, low priority plan, and then you say for the high priority plan, I need to have my server, and I need to have this document share and my email in this particular high priority plan, and that's how you apply it. And then basically on the back end, that agent will supply the antivirus on the front end protection, so really the identification, the prevention. And if something happens, then it will have your disaster recovery plan or the backup plan attached to that. And the location you can pinpoint. So, for example, in our plans, also you could say the high priority information needs to be in a, so it's in Poland, it needs to be in a Polish data center.
Okay.
So you basically pick a Polish data center because it cannot leave the country. But you could theoretically also pick another location in Frankfurt or the UK, and you can do that all from the interface. The beauty also is coming back then towards Microsoft 365. So you don't want to set up each individual account with your emails. And so what you can do, you can add your registration of Microsoft 365 into the Acronis Backup Cloud, and it pulls down all your user information and also the hierarchy that you have. So from a security perspective, it's also separated in the right way so that each individual user with their agent on their client can do also themselves a lot of the recovery work or exploring work if it needs to be.
So you can also include Office 365 into your recovery,
yes.
Right?
And you will have it all into one dashboard, and monitoring, and all the information gets consolidated.
What about the website, though? It's obviously, legal office website is not a major thing in terms of traffic or nothing. So we just have a web space package with Contabo where we have this website. are we able to connect this as well, or do we need to have a total
It
control over the
depends.
server?
So we do work with certain vendors where websites are created through, for example, like control panels like cPanel and Plask and so on. We have integrations with them so that you can actually not only the whole cPanel server, but also individual accounts, we can create that. We do have also individual integrations with certain website builders that you can then recover as well. We are working on a WordPress integration currently today that will probably be released at the end of this year, where you then, if you have created a WordPress website, you can also pull that in. But it doesn't work
regardless
with
of the provider.
But you could theoretically pinpoint the server where this website is built on, if you have that, and basically back up and disaster recover that particular whole server with the website on top of it.
Provided it's on a VPS, right, or something like this. If it's
For
just
example,
a
yes.
shared hosting
Yes.
account, this is a slightly different situation.
Correct.
I understand.
Correct.
Okay, like I hope my mom is listening, because I think it will be extremely
But you
helpful
did,
for
right?
her.
You listened, right?
Yeah,
So
of course I did, but it's I think there is quite a lot of people who are in the same situation that I thought it would be a good example. So from your experience, how long would it take for someone to make such a setup? Are we talking hours, days, weeks? Like, what's the initial effort to actually build such a plan for
normally
such
we
an
activate
office?
and count for our vendors within, I would say, a couple of hours if they register through our express process, or if you go to any of the larger service providers that has Acronis or those types of services live, you mostly have an instance access as soon as you register for it. And then I would say within 2-3 hours, you can set everything up. And depending on how many devices you have, normally if you have one device, literally it's a couple of minutes, and then you sync the first one. So the initial seeding is probably the biggest time consumer, depending on how fast your connection is. And then after that, it runs, right? So you want to make sure that you keep a check on it a couple of times a week.
Try to restart from time to time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I know it might not be easy, but this is the question. That will be the question my mom would ask me next here. Like, she would definitely ask me, like, okay, so in what ballpark such a disaster recovery plan would cost me? Like, again, I don't expect that you will give me an amount, to a very dollar, but are we talking about, hundreds of euros, thousands of euros? Like, what is the ballpark of the
this
price
would
for
be
such
more
a
in the
setup?
tens of euros, depending on the device. So if you look normally at a device for a workstation has, let's say, 50 gigabytes. If your average price in the market would be about, I don't know, 10 cents per gigabyte, that is an okay price right now. Then you basically pay $5 for this
$5 for an instance, right? We have, let's say, five
for
laptops.
This, or maybe there's some premium service on top of that. So we pay maybe, let's say, a $10 per workstation is a very normal price if you have about $50.
Okay. Then you need to add phones. Then you need to add server.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just trying to do the quick math together. But it looks like we're talking about less than 100 euros a month, right? More or less.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. If you go really in high-end servers with terabytes of data, then of course that could be completely different.
Yeah, of course. But we're talking like small office, right?
Data center locations that are more exotic, where internet traffic is much more higher, then potentially you'll pay more. But if you go into most of the Central European countries, it's very competitive. If you talk about databases where you have more volumes, then yes, sure, you pay a little bit more. But definitely for a workstation or for a phone or Microsoft 365, you can buy for $5.99, $7.99 for the license for Microsoft 365. And most of the add-ons you will have for $2-3 on top of that, where you have the additional email security backup solutions attached towards that, unlimited backups.
Okay, awesome. I do have a couple questions to you, but I would like also to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have any questions to JJ, please post them in the comments, and I will read it for JJ in a minute. But going back to things I wanted to learn from you is, okay, so provided that I now understand how important it is to have a disaster recovery plan, where do I start? Like, do you have any go-to resources that you would say, like, yes, read this first, go there, and then that's from where you can start your journey with creating a disaster recovery plan?
Uh, our site is always a very good place to start with because we give also a lot of general information, case studies, content about what it is the service delivers. So there will be always a very good start. And we refer then also on our website to specific partners that we work with, where it's completely integrated and automated with. And of course, also through our website, you can start any kind of express sign up process as well. The express sign up process is more for if you're a commercial company like an MSP or you're managing something yourself, not so much for end customers. End customers, of course, can buy the service that we have online for end customers there, but mostly we drive our business through partnerships.
Okay. And can you just give me the names of your biggest partners out there? Just a few of them in the certain geographies.
In Europe, Strato, Ionis are big customers of ours. In the United States, we have GoDaddy, or we have ShareWeb, or we have LiquidWeb. We have smaller players in smaller countries as well, like HostNet in the Netherlands, or we have telecommunication companies like KPN, British Telecom, SoftBank in Japan. We almost in every country we have a set of service providers that offer different services. Mostly, if you also have hosting providers that uses control panels in the shared hosting space, Plastic and cPanel, we're integrated with Plastic and cPanel. That means that you can always use those services as well. We have plugins for that. You can go through Acronis directly, and there you can find more information which other partners we have as well.
Awesome. Do you know any online courses, for example, or like, one-on-one on disaster recovery that you could recommend to someone?
Yeah, of course, we have our YouTube channel that basically is very accessible to everyone. Very easy. Just search for Acronis Cyber Protection or Cyber Cloud. Then you will find tons of videos about how our solution works. We do have also an official online training program. Means that as soon as you become a partner or you register as a partner portal, you get access to our program. Here we have a huge, I would say, training course, step by step, one-on-one starting point from what is security, what is backup, what is disaster recovery, what is protection, what is prevention, and it goes into how do I set up. It's as well for salespeople as well as for technical people. So we have a huge range of sessions that range from 10, 15 minutes to 2 hours, or even online sessions with physical attendance where people can then also ask questions. We have evangelists ready as well that you can then open a chat window where you can ask questions, where an evangelist will help you as well. So all of those type of things are available for partners that we have and customers that we have.
Okay, then let me bring one question from the audience. So we have a question here from Dennis. And Dennis says that many VPSs are based on Linux, and he is interested how the backup gigabytes are counted. It's only per use space, or also the empty space is included in the charge?
It's only the use space. So if you make a backup, not only that, and by the way, Linux is supported. We do already a compression before it actually leaves to our data center. Then in our data center, we compress it again. And that is basically what you get charged for. So if you have, for example, I don't know, a 500 gigabytes hard disk, and you have only 200 gigabytes hard disks space on it, then we will probably back up less than 200 gigs, depending on how we can consolidate that or make that efficiently. Of course, over time, if you, for example, say I would have multiple timestamps and multiple snapshots of the changes that I'm making, and you would like to keep every change on your backup plan, then of course over time that will increase. But if you say I need only one last backup, then you basically will have that what you actually are using mostly as maximum that you can have on your backup as a charge.
Okay, awesome. And then on this note, then we have discussed the idea of how you can in case of emergency, recover your, or like create basically this image in Acronis Cloud to basically have the operational instance. But obviously this is not a long-term solution, right? It's like ultimately, you want to get back to your original server. And is there an option to use the Acronis product to basically restore your backup to the original server?
Absolutely. And that's what comes back to the 321 as well. Yes, sure. If you have a very critical server and you have not the time to recover from a backup that you've made, that you even have in your office, but you literally need to recover in minutes, then you do disaster recovery. It's also not the most economically way to run a disaster recovery for months or weeks or days. It's just not economically, right? It's just much more expensive. So absolutely, if you have multiple backups, you start doing a disaster recovery, bring it up very quickly so your website is not down or your service is not down. And then in the back end, you basically take your other backup that you have maybe locally and restore that. If you don't have a local backup, it's also fine. You can still restore from the cloud space back towards your original position. And we have some technology, which is an acquisition of a company that we did from San Francisco, where we basically highlight what are the most frequently used applications and services on the backup. And that's what we restore first so that we can already start operating and you can start working with them. And on the back end, we start restoring all of the files that you don't use so frequently, and we can wait for that. So there's certain tools and features in the software as well to make sure that if you restore from the cloud, that you have the optimization in there as well. Because if everybody knows, restoring from the cloud is not always the fastest compared to if you're the hard disk where you backup directly connected towards your device of destination.
This is true. We have a follow-up from Dennis, actually. And I guess this is more a question to me than to you, JJ. And the question is, are we actually have a plan to start offering Acronis as the solution in Contabo? Because I think we should be open about this, that currently there is no integration. And of course, everyone is open, or we are open for you guys to install Acronis client on your servers and VPSs. And this is one of the reasons why we're talking with JJ today is to make it to make this option more popular and to make sure you guys have a disaster recovery plan in place. But we currently have no official plans to launch any new partnership with Acronis. But who knows what the future will bring, right? We now know that JJ is a nice guy.
Dennis. Vote.
So this might change in the future, but right now we would just recommend you to use Acronis solutions directly with Acronis, and we always vote with all the strength we have for you guys to be prepared in case of disaster recovery, because things happen, right? Like you said at the beginning, JJ, there's a lot of reasons why you may need the plan.
Yeah, and the misconception or the misperception in the world is that if I have my data in a data center, I am okay. And I think we have now proven that is not the case, right? And a fire in a data center with OVH, and I feel so sorry for those people because I never wish it to anyone. But that's just an extreme case. But it happens every day, every minute, every second that a hard disk just fails. And sure, Contabo will replace that hard disk, but will not guarantee that the data that is on that hard disk will be recoverable. That's not their responsibility.
Yeah, that's true. It's not a good part of the truth, but that's true, and that's why it's not only about the hard disks and data center fire, because there are kind of an extreme cases, but we've seen so many cases in which somebody had just ransomware is probably one of the most common things we've seen on the support, right? And it's we cannot really do anything with people asking us for help there. It's you should have been prepared. That's the only thing we can say.
And that is exactly where we make a difference, because we have the antivirus included and integrated into one application. Because one of the reasons, and that is also a very interesting fact here, restoring data out of our data center is very expensive. Everybody knows that the difference, or most of the people know that ingress and outgress is a huge difference in costing. Every data that goes out of our data center costs a lot. When we saw the spikes 6-7 years ago with ransomware becoming more an issue, we indeed saw also our customers that they were not protected well from the front end. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, we can recover from the backup, but it will take first a lot of time. That is frustration. Not only that, it also, costs some money. And that's exactly where we said, hey, we need to have prevention as good as recovery into one product. And that's why, as you already mentioned, front end protection is as important, because you don't want to do recovery. You don't want to get there. So make sure that you have a good prevention in the front end, then we don't have to talk about disaster recovery in the back end.
Awesome. JJ, thank you very much for your time.
You're
It was
welcome.
great to have you here, and thank you for walking us through all the steps that are needed to have a disaster recovery plan in place. This recording is going to be available on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel. We'll also make sure to add the links to the resources that JJ has mentioned during the video today. And in a few days, we will also have a transcript of that available in our blog in case you guys prefer to read it instead of listening over to 50 minutes of conversation. Thank you very much, JJ. It was great to have you today.
You're welcome. And I hope everybody has a safe and good rest of the week.